Hello, BookTube. Some of you may have seen on Aaron Facer's channel that he recently did a book haul and said that it was his last book haul for a good long time. And then almost immediately he made another book haul that he made very few apologies for. And I viewed this as something of a tossed gauntlet, something of a taunt. So in our next shirtless Skype session, instead of just peppering him with questions about how little Stevina is doing, I also asked him, well, isn't this a little much? You making all these book hauls? You're starting to make me look bad. And he said that I did look bad, and that if I didn't do a book haul myself, I would be a cuck, which he pronounces cook. I neither want to be called a cock nor a cook, so I wasn't planning on going back to the Brattle bookshop, but I did. I went back on an absolutely gorgeous morning when I had nothing else to do. No other errands, nothing else to call me down there, and no compulsion to hurry up, because my bean was perfectly happy back here, and also because the weather was perfect. And for those of you who are new to the channel, might not know why that would make a difference. It does make a difference because the Brattle has a sale lot outdoor. That's the whole floor plan of another building. It's huge. Thousands more books for $1, $3, and $5, arranged in no way other than price. So you never know what the next book you're going to look at is going to be. And, of course, because they're outside, that's weather dependent. It's not as weather dependent as you might think. If you're really bitten by the bug, you will go to the Brattle sale lot in all weathers. I have been there in all weathers. They top everything over and cover everything up in really inclement weather, but otherwise no. So I went, and I got a pile of books. I don't know if it'll allow me to keep pace with Aaron Facer, but it'll do for a Monday morning. And I want to show you what they were. Once again, it was just a pile of heavy books, but the bag that I'm using, the current bag that I'm using, the leather shoulder bag, it works perfectly. Boy, did I find a keeper. For $2 at a charity shop. Boy, did I find a keeper. And some of these books dovetail with BookTube or YouTube in one way or another. Let's see here. So the first thing I found was a mass market paperback. This is from 1989. It is published by the Foreign Language Press in Beijing. And this is Strange Tales from Make Do Studio, translated by Dennis and Victor Mayer. This is Pu Songling. Strange Tales from Make Do Studio. And I believe this is probably one of the first times the mass market edition of anything from Pu Songling has been made available in America. I don't recall selling this in bookstores, but it might not have been distributed to mainstream bookstores where I was working. And this is weird. These are weird stories. They were collected by this author a little more than a generation after Shakespeare, and they are strange stories. All sorts of were animals, all sorts of phantasms and ghosts, the supernatural world just completely intertwines with the ordinary everyday world here. So this is not sword and sorcery. The supernatural world is not viewed as all that exceptional. It's not really viewed as something for you to even, as a couple of the stories in this collection demonstrate, it's not really even something so amazing that it's good reason for you to stop preparing supper. And I thought, how amazing. Haven't had a copy of this in forever. I didn't have it. It wasn't this edition that I had. I don't quite remember who made the edition that I had. But I found this. Strange Tales from Make Do Studio. And then a second later I found this. A Penguin Classic of Pu Songling. This one is translated by John Minford, and it is called Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio. With a different cover. This little mass market paperback has a few illustrations, and this Penguin trade paperback has a lot of illustrations there all throughout this thing. So I've got two different translations of this thing to study and read back to back. I haven't encountered either one of these, so this is going to be fascinating to see what these two have to offer back to back. That's going to be fascinating. Might even say that it's prime fodder for a long piece on my revived book blog, Steve Reads. You might even say that. It was one of the first thoughts that came to my mind. I'm very happy to find both of these things. I don't know what Phoenix Books is. I have no idea how widely available they were in the U.S., but I would have been happy to find either one of these, but there was something extra joyful about finding two translations, probably the two most widely distributed translations that you could get. That's wonderful, especially since I can't read the original. So this is going to give me great triangulation ability. Then the next thing that I found was a hardcover. It's a little rough condition, but I will clean it up, and then I will put a dust jacket protector on it. This is by Irving Wallace, who is completely forgotten now. He was a huge best-selling author. He wrote these giant megalith books. People looked forward to the new Irving Wallace. Bookstore clerks had to know the last three in case a customer came in and knew they wanted that but didn't have any identifying information other than that. So you had to be familiar with this author. He's now completely gone. Sic transit gloria mundi. But he wrote a couple of books that were really good. I would argue that he wrote a number of books that were really good. But this is probably my favorite one. And I had this once upon a time as a mass market paperback with this cover. And the mass market paperback, that's how I read it first. That I fell in love with it. I read it till it fell apart. Or actually, I think this particular book was torn apart by my dogs. I had one book of his about a black president, about a black U.S. president that fell apart. I think this one was torn apart. But this is probably my favorite book of his. This is The Word by Irving Wallace. There is the inimitable author photo on the back. You can see this thing has seen better days. This will look just fine. It'll be nice and indestructible once I put a covering on it. But this is Irving Wallace. A lot of his best books, see, this has dirt on it as well, but that will clean off. If I'm very gentle, that will clean off. His best books, his big books, have their germination in an idea that can be put in one sentence. Basically an elevator pitch, which I think we would probably say that if your book can be reduced to an elevator pitch, fine. Most great books can. But if your book starts with an elevator pitch and then you write the book, it's probably trash. And probably Irving Wallace is trash. I would hesitate to say that completely because I think he falls into the heading of the kind of authors that I want to understand. The kind of authors that fall in that bracketed period that I've talked about a few times on this channel, between the end of World War II and the end of American democracy. So 1945 to 2025. What was written in that time period? And who were the ones who dominated the bestseller list? Maybe the ones who didn't dominate the bestseller list but were still taken seriously and are forgotten. Are completely forgotten. So this thing, The Word, came out in 1972. Perfect. That is exactly the time period. And I know this book. A lot of the books that I'm sort of informally grouping into this mega study that I'm never going to write and that no one's ever going to write are not things that I've read. They're not authors that I know really well because there are a million people that I would want to work into this mega study of some kind or another. But this is a book. This is an author. I've read everything. I'm pretty sure I've read everything that he's written, and I read this book and liked it. Read it a couple of times. And the one sentence elevator pitch is, what if we found another gospel? What if another gospel turned up out of nowhere, outside of the church's control? What if that happened? And what if it was significantly different from the gospels that exist, and yet its provenance could be absolutely impeccably traced? What would happen? And this book just takes that and runs with it. It's actually a lot of fun. Irving Wallace is a lot of fun to read. No matter, I wonder if this gives me a list of other things that he's written. Probably not. Oh, somebody put their little stamp on it. At least they didn't put it on the cover. That's something to be grateful for. Did they give me an idea? No, they don't even tell me about Irving Wallace. They don't need to. At this time, they don't even need to. But I was happy to find it. I would have snapped up the mass market paperback. I might still. But I was happy to find the hardcover because this is more durable. This will last a lot better. I had all these books, lugging these books on the way back on the subway in Boston. I should probably add a little PSA here, a little public service announcement about that. Anybody, any public transport users from Boston who might somehow be listening to this video, maybe down the line in the future? Little PSA to all of you using public transportation. I am a lifelong user of public transportation. I want to point out something to you that maybe I've pointed out before, maybe you're not clear on the concept, which is that if you take that normal procedure, all of us living in a city together, we all have rules, we all have courtesies that we obey or it wouldn't work. If you take all of that and decide, to hell with that, I heard on Joe Rogan that I don't have enough testosterone, so I'm going to turn this whole thing into the law of the frickin' jungle. Meaning, I'm going to be as rude and physically imposing as I want to anybody based solely on physical force. That's it. That's the law of the jungle. I'm going to do what I want based on physical force, because this is not an agreed upon compact between people. This is the law of the frickin' jungle. I want to make a little PSA to anyone who thinks that way on the Boston public transport system, which is that if you do that, you have absolutely no grounds to whine if that goes against you. You don't hear hyenas or lions or leopards whining when that goes against them. You have absolutely no grounds to whine if you make it the law of the frickin' jungle and then it works against you. Okay? I know that I look like a doddering old wreck, but I am almost certainly physically stronger than you are. And I weigh, although I don't look it, 250 pounds. And I have almost certainly a lot more experience at physical combat than you do. And I can't feel pain. And I already hate you. So if you want to do that, fine. Unless you take it a little too far, in which case the law will be involved and you'll go to jail. But if you want to do that in an ordinary thing, an ordinary part of the day that no one should even be thinking about, if you've decided, because Andrew Tate told you to, that you're going to make that the law of the frickin' jungle, well, you had better be absolutely sure that you are the biggest bear on the block. And if you're not, tough. You started it. If you're going to drag us all down to fourth grader logic, you started it. Anyway, we're not moving far away from the manosphere, from the bro-tube world, the dude bro world. I give it a lot of nods on this channel, and one of you a year ago suggested the disarming reason why, and that is because perhaps, in addition to being the foremost critic of the dude bros, I am also their lord. Oh God. Could that be true? I don't know, but I bought one of their books. They have a handful of books. They're not readers, but they always tell you that reading is really important. They only say that because they're aping the grifters from the so-called intellectual dark web who tout reading and also don't read. So it's just this daisy chain of lying about this activity that we all love. But they don't recommend just any book or any good book. The dude bros that I have seen would literally rather die than read a book written by a woman. For instance, Jane Austen, they would literally rather die. So you hand them a copy of Mansfield Park, and you say, here's a copy of Mansfield Park. It's utterly delightful. It'll take you a couple of chapters to get used to Jane Austen's style of diction. Then you'll be off to the races. Oh, and also, I'm sitting on this chair backwards because I'm using the back of the chair to brace this double-barreled buckshot rifle. It's 6 inches away from your chest. And if you don't read Mansfield Park, I'm going to murder you. I'm going to pull the trigger and blow you into component parts. I'm going to blow you into butcher's meat so that you could land on an operating table and no one could save you. And dude bros, the real card-carrying kind, would say, go ahead and pull the trigger. I'm not even going to bother to try. Go ahead and pull the trigger. I've already sired 60 kids that I don't pay for. I've already built my empire. I've already alienated all of my friends. Go ahead. I'm already accomplished all the Andrew Tate stuff I need to accomplish. So go ahead and pull the trigger. They would literally rather die than read a book by Jane Austen. But they will still talk about how reading's really important, man. Maybe I'll give you a top 10 list. Maybe we'll do a top 10 list someday. You can predict the top 10 list down to the last book literally 2 years before they make that video. And I found one of their books today. I got a copy from this years ago from the old book depository. and read it. Kind of thought that parts of it were interesting because, in a way, I kind of understood why the Dude Bro world grabbles this book. But I got rid of that paperback. That paperback I no longer have. And I found another paperback today that is actually better. I like it anyway better. It's Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari, who has become a member in good standing of the so-called intellectual dark web. When women are absolutely not invited to Dave Rubin's studio or the guys at Trigonometry. They don't even know that women exist. And if a woman were to come to their studio and say, well, here's what I think about international monetary trade, they would, on camera, punch that woman in the face. And they wouldn't lose a single viewer for it. So, but when those channels with the stupid canned sets and the extremely masculine odds and ends in the background, when they want to chin stroke and gum over some self-evident subject, they call a rotating card catalog of the intellectual dark web. There's about 20 of these frauds. And Yuval Noah Harari is one of them. He's one of the people that they call. He's one of the people who will agonize over whatever deep subject it is. What deep subject are we talking about today? I don't know. If you're in a public square and someone expresses an opinion you don't like, should you kill them? Should you have the right to kill them? Well, here's what the wokerati say about that. No, it's a question for a 5-year-old. Should you kill someone who disagrees with you? No. Ask any 5-year-old in the school up the street. Should you kill someone who disagrees with you? No. They'll all say no at the same time because it's that simple a question. But no, we want a chin stroke at least long enough to monetize the video. I mean, come on, man. This is a canned history of humanity. It isn't any more effective an actual history of humanity than is one of the other of those 20 books that the Dude Bros love, which is Guns, Germs, and Steel, which they don't see. When you show them a copy of Jared Diamond's Guns, Germs, and Steel, they see Guns, Germs, Steels, and Penises. They think that's the title of the book. They see the title Guns, Germs, and Steel, and they know beyond any doubt that there'll be no chicks in their reading experience, and that's what they want. For God's sake, do you expect me to read about these squishy things? I don't even want to be around them except to procreate the future generations of my progeny to uphold my empire. Of course, they'll all hate me, right? They'll all hate me because it's the Roy family. And if I'm doing my job right, of course my offspring will hate me. Of course they will. That's so cool. But this, sorry, I'm gonna go. I clearly need to do another Bro Watch video if I got this much steam in me belt. But this has the French flaps. It's a heavier trade paperback. You're not gonna be able to see that, and it has lots of illustrations in color all throughout, not just an inset in the middle, but all throughout the book. So I will clean this up. This is a little bit dirty. I'm assuming that the Dude Bro who owned this before me died. Probably of lung cancer. So I will clean this up, and this will just be my copy of Sapiens. I don't think I need the other books by Harari. I don't think I do. Then this next one is a big trade paperback in beautiful condition. This is from Basic Books. I think I got a copy of this once upon a time. This was a reissue, a reprint by Basic Books in 2013. This was this was reprinted in 2013. It came out in 20 years before that. It's a Kennedy book. It's a Kennedy assassination book. And I smiled a big, warm smile when I saw it, so I had to get it. I don't have a copy, now I do. It's a perfect condition copy of Crossfire by Jim Marrs. Very hopefully subtitled The Basis of Oliver Stone's JFK. This is Jim Marrs doing the whole Kennedy assassination thing, going over the events of the day, going over the inconsistencies, the weirdnesses, the genuine hooks. Remember we say with conspiracies or weird theories of any kind, you don't have to think about it. You can just completely dismiss the chatter from the intellectual dark web unless there are actual hooks. If you read through the official description, the official account of some story, and it just doesn't work, there's something in it that just doesn't work, well, then that's a hook. There are no hooks in the flat Earth theory that Tucker Carlson believes in. There are no hooks in creationism by one particular set of gods. Not so you believe in creationism, that all life on Earth was individually created by gods, but only your gods. It's your gods who did the creating. And why do you believe that? I don't know, because my book tells me so. And why do you believe your book? Because I was raised that way. There are no hooks in creationism. There are no hooks in flat Earth theory. Also, I want to point out that creationism is a literal interpretation of the Bible, which means it is flat Earthism. But with the Kennedy assassination, of course, famously there are hooks. Famously, there are inconsistencies that are downright weird. And Jim Marrs takes those and just runs with them. Oh my God, he not only runs with them, but eventually he gets so tired of the hooks that he finds in the JFK assassination story that he pauses the manuscript and goes to Costco to buy an entire box of new hooks. It's very engaging. Don't take it with a huge grain of salt, but it's very engaging. As a Kennedy book, I could not not have it. And we don't have Jim Marrs in the world anymore, which I know there are people out there who will say, well, good riddance, but to me it's just sad. He never met a conspiracy theory that he didn't love, but I still think the world is a much lesser place without him in it. So I got this, and I'm very glad to have it. Then this next one is a rebuy. The copy that I have is in terrible shape, and I love this book. I have it as an ebook, but I love the book, so I grabbed it. I will put a protective covering over this. This, of course, needs no introduction on BookTube. This is well known. This is The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt by Edmund Morris, which is Roosevelt up until the moment when he comes rattling down from the mountain and takes up the presidency. Up until the moment when McKinley is shot and dies, and suddenly Roosevelt is going to be president. What were the odds? All the commentary, Henry Adams all the way down, saying, well, McKinley seems like a good man, a noble man, a virtuous man. All of that was true. But boy, are we alarmed by his vice presidential pick, because what if something were to happen to McKinley? You want this madman, this child, in charge of the country? And even the people who worried about that the most, the DuPont Circle crowd, thought, well, yes, it is worrisome, but what are the odds? McKinley will serve for 2 whole terms. What are the odds? They happened. The odds happened. And Morris went on, of course, to write 2 more volumes. He wrote Theodore Rex about Roosevelt in office, and then The Colonel about Roosevelt after office. And you would think, considering all that I've said about biographies and the infinite amount that I've talked about biographies on this channel, you would think that those 2 volumes would be of more interest to me, especially Theodore Rex, which is, I think, the best volume in the series, just because it has the most material. It's Roosevelt when he was affecting the whole world. But there's something about this book, this first book. This is Edmund Morris writing as an author with something to prove. This is Edmund Morris writing, swinging for the fences, aiming for the lights. And his scholarship doesn't change for the next 2 volumes or anything else that he wrote. But there's something in that quality. That quality, of course, goes away. You can't maintain that. Once you arrive, you've arrived. You can't maintain that quality. And that quality is all through this book, like lightning. I love this. I know that I shouldn't have such a sentimental place in my heart for it, but I do. Very much so, I do. So when I saw this isn't good enough shape. I'll put a plastic covering over this, and I'll finally be able to retire the copy that's on my shelf, because that copy has seen better days. I think that copy is stuffed with clippings. Theodore Roosevelt is a little bit out of vogue right now. There's a big biography it's not a biography, it's a biographical treatment in some way or other. Much like Wilderness Warrior wasn't a complete biography, it was more, we're going to go at him in this way. I think there is a book like that about TR coming out early next year. And I think the Prism, Wilderness Warrior, was about Theodore Roosevelt and the natural world, ecology and conservation and whatnot. I think the one coming out in early 2025 is about Theodore Roosevelt and politics. Theodore Roosevelt as a political creature, and if I'm remembering correctly, it's from a fairly big popular press, so it might get some coverage before all the volumes are confiscated. by the U.S. government and pulped along with their author. But this, there isn't much, is what I'm saying. There aren't many volumes on Theodore Roosevelt or on the Progressive Era, and this book doesn't actually get us to the Progressive Era. Instead, it takes its sweet time telling the incredible story of Theodore Roosevelt, an asthmatic boy who, by sheer force of will, built himself into a physical person, built himself into an athlete, his time at Harvard, his time as a dude rancher, his time on the New York police force, and also the incredible tragedies that haunted him, the people that he lost in his life. By the time he reached the point where where he stood for this portrait, he had already known his share of deep, deep grief. And I don't mean, losing a distant great-grandmother that you barely knew. I'm talking about the kind of grief that I've mentioned on this channel before, where you look at it in the future, you imagine it as a possibility, and you say, I know myself, I know my strengths and weaknesses, and I cannot survive that grief. If I lose that person, I also will go. You are never right about that. That is never true. But there are some losses that you can look at in your life and say, well, I will not survive that. And Roosevelt had two of them, and he suffered them both in a matter of hours. And survived it, of course. But this book covers all of that, and Morris gives it such heart that okay, there's the super hottie Roosevelt. That's Roosevelt from Harvard. There's the super hottie Roosevelt on the back. He covers it with such heart that I just had to get it. I'll replace my old volume. Then we have a bit of a theme here. Believe you me, this theme could have been a lot worse. It's not as bad as it could have been. We have two books to go through. It's just a theme of two. This first one is by Noah Andre Trudeau. Oh my God. Does that mean I got two books by people with the name Noah? Okay. This is Gettysburg, a testing of courage. A one-volume history of the Battle of Gettysburg in the American Civil War. I don't know. This thing came out, I think, in 2008 or 9. 2002. I don't know that I ever read this. I don't think I ever did. I'm pretty sure that I never reviewed it. I'll check and see. I'll try to leave a link if I did. But this is a one-volume history of the Battle of Gettysburg that is widely viewed as, in popular histories, as the turning point of the American Civil War. It isn't. It wasn't the turning point of the American Civil War. The turning point of the American Civil War was the firing on Fort Sumter. There was never any chance that the South could win against the North. None. There was no chance at all. There was never any chance that the South could win against the North. There was never any chance that, for instance, a powerful foreign government was going to align itself with a slaveocracy. That was never going to happen. And there were, without such alliances, without Spain or Great Britain pouring in resources, there was never any chance that the South was going to beat the North alone in defense of slavery, in defense of the cause of slavery. That was never going to happen. But people look at Gettysburg as the turning point because it was the South invading the North. It was Robert E. Lee at the head of his troops, which by this point had seen everything, been blooded a million times, been victorious in battles that they should not have won. And it's nice, open, rolling territory, and there are no ambiguities at all about what happened. None at all. It's not a zigzagging terrain. It's not a bog. It's not a wilderness. It's a row of fortifications on a rise over a slow sloping field. So if you are fool enough, and Robert E. Lee was fool enough, to take your men out of Enfilade and say, there's the ridge, take that ridge, knowing that they are going to be under unremitting fire the whole time. If you're fool enough to do that, well, if your men take that ridge, you win. And if they don't take that ridge, you lose. Not just the battle, but everything. It is in military conflicts, it is rare that you will get a war that boils down to that kind of a tableau. And Gettysburg, for good or ill, is that tableau in American military history. And the South, of course, loses. There was no chance whatsoever that Lee's men could do that. artillery fire doesn't care how valiant you are. And there were men on Lee's forces that knew that. They looked at that field, rising slowly over the course of a mile to ridges full of Union artillery that knew they were coming, that were prepared, that had tons and tons of reserve ammo, thousands and thousands of reserve men. I'm not the world's biggest fan of General Meade, but if you put him in a position like that, he's not going to blow it. And Lee knew that. Did it anyway. So I got this volume, and we will see. I am worried about the subtitle, A Testing of Courage. I'm worried about that, because there are ways to write about Gettysburg. And there are a whole bunch of books about Gettysburg that are the bad way to write about Gettysburg. They're dripping in saccharine sentimentality. I don't want to read that. That would be a waste of time. But this was cheap, so I got it. And I also got this Stephen Spears book on Gettysburg. Another one-volume history of Gettysburg by the guy who wrote, what was the name of his Antietam book? Landscape Turned Red. Landscape Turned Red was his Antietam book. Rather unfairly, we think of him almost exclusively in terms of that and one other book. What was his big Civil War book that did so well? No, that's the one I'm thinking of. He did a bunch of others, but Landscape Turned Red, his Antietam book, is a classic. It is probably the most readable one-volume history of Antietam. It's a little unfair because he wrote a lot of books about the American Civil War, probably a dozen of them. And I have read his book on Gettysburg. When did this thing come out? Don't think that I reviewed this, but I did read it, 2003. So I might have reviewed it. I'll check and see. But you can check and see too. Just go to Google and check in my name and his name. And this is another one-volume history of Gettysburg. I know Sears is writing. He is prone to the kind of saccharine sentimentality that I'm talking about. But I think, if I remember correctly, he restrains himself in this book. So I got two histories of Gettysburg to join. I think I have two others. It's a much written of battle, and I have read, oh God, I don't even know how many books about the Battle of Gettysburg. I find it fascinating. In many, many different ways, I find it fascinating. The battle was unintentional, for instance. Lee had no idea that he was approaching the main body of the Union forces in the area. He had no idea, because his cavalry leader, Jeb Stuart, had failed him. And the saccharine sentimental versions of the Battle of Gettysburg will always say that it was a rare failing. It absolutely was not. Jeb Stuart failed at almost everything he did from the minute that he flunked out of West Point, or almost did. He was an absolutely bad officer. He has there's this mystique that attaches itself to Confederate traitor officers that I will never understand. It's from the top down. The mystique is never at its stronger than Robert E. Lee, but it attaches to all of his named generals. Longstreet might be an exception, and Longstreet did not agree with the tactics that were undertaken at Gettysburg. Famously, he disagreed with them. He did them anyway, but he disagreed with them. But Stonewall Jackson, Jeb Stuart, Nathan Bedford Forrest, all the way up to Robert E. Lee. They're all incompetents. They do not sustain the mythos that has grown up around them. I'll never understand that mythos. You only have to look at their pros and con ratio on a sheet of paper to see what so many historians of the American Civil War don't want to admit. I don't know why. Maybe people like Sears and who's this Noah guy, Trudeau? Maybe they were all raised on, Civil War boys' own adventure stories from 70 years ago, 60 years ago. I have no idea what the reason is. I've never understood it myself. I have not the slightest drop of sympathy or admiration for the traitors who rebelled against the Union and wanted to destroy it so they could keep owning slaves. They should all have been murdered. And also, every single scrap of ground in the American South should either have been wholesale turned over to the black people who were freed but had no infrastructure. The infrastructure was completely against them. All of that land should have been turned over to them. You now own these farms where you used to be beaten and whipped and chained. You can run these farms, large and small, and keep the economy running in the South. Either that should have been done, or the North could have absorbed all of those slaves, anyway, and found something for them to do. They didn't need to stay there. But if you're not going to do that, then raise all of those farms, burn everything down to the ground level, and then salt the earth so that no one can ever create any kind of economy in the South again. And needless to say, ship all the women and children north, either as indentured servants to live for the rest of their lives or to be re-educated if the children are young enough, and kill every single adult male. I don't care if you're a bank clerk in Richmond who had no idea, no concept of joining the ranks. Doesn't matter. You didn't leave. You were part of the Confederacy, you die. All of them. All of them. Starting with Robert E. Lee at Appomattox Courthouse. Walk him down the stairs, and before he can get to Traveler and have his picturesque exit, have some men drag him to the tallest branch of the highest tree and hang him in front of his own men. That's what should have happened. And I'm alone in that. That's not a normal reaction to the American Civil War. And these books, these two Gettysburg books, will probably have a lot of the reaction that I don't like, which is that this was a valiant enemy, that this was a wonderful time. Oh my God, how many books have I read that boil down to, well, this is just boys fighting, and don't we look back on it fondly? Some of the veterans themselves look back on it that way. It's absolutely insane. Anyway, I got these two. There were plenty more. Oh my God, it is a boom time in the Brattle sale lot for American Civil War books of all kinds. Oh my God. I saw a Norton Critical Edition, modern Norton Critical Edition of the collected writings of Abraham Lincoln. I didn't get it, but it was totally clean. The Norton Critical Editions you have to watch because they're used in schools. So you will often open one, it'll be covered in stupid highlighting, but this was completely clean. Someone sold it without ever looking at it. I was tempted by that and a bunch of other things. Oh my God, they were all over the place. But I didn't. I just got these two. I controlled myself. And then this last one, the last thing that we'll do here, I did not expect to find this. I was overjoyed to see it. Recently, for my newly revived book blog, Steve Reads, I wrote about William Shire's kids' book on the hunt for the Bismarck, the hunting and sinking of the Bismarck. And I hadn't really studied in detail any of those old landmark kids' books, those landmark history books, so it was fun to study it in detail, but it definitely whetted my appetite for an adult version of the hunt for the Bismarck. And there was one that I wanted more than anything else. There are a few that are really, really good. But there was one that was written by a really eloquent journalist. Not always a guarantee. And also a journalist who was a big aficionado of naval warfare and who participated in the hunt for the Bismarck. And I found it today in perfect condition with a plastic covering on it. What are the odds? This is Ludovic Kennedy. This is his book, Pursuit. Of all the Bismarck books, the hunt for the Bismarck books that I could have found in the Brattle sale lot, this is the one that I would have wanted most and would have expected to find least. And I found it. so I'm really in the mood for this. I know that I always say when I do a Brattle haul that depending on what my mail is like that day or that week, something from the Brattle haul is going to go on the reading for tonight. Usually it's more than one something, and usually I read through these things quickly anyway. Usually very seldom do I get a pile of books at the Brattle, and let's say 2 months goes by and I still haven't read them all. That's very rare. I'm on the hunt at the Brattle Bookshop for keepers. I'm on the hunt for things that are going to go into my library and never leave it. So, you know, there's only one way to find out if you've bought a keeper, and that's to read it and find out. I've read this already. I got this out of a library a long time ago. This may very well make the reading tonight. Although, as weird as it is, I mean, I haven't read Pu Song Ling in so long. And never either one of these translations. And, of course, sentimentality would push me to read Crossfire. And I got the two Gettysburg books that seem natural to read back to back. But believe it or not, aside from this, the thing that's pulling at me the most is The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt. That's crazy. I've read it a lot of times. Probably read it more often. Have I read it more often than anything else here? Yes, I have. Yep. I read Crossfire a few times, including once in galleys, or actually not galleys. One long before most other people in the world had seen it. I read it. But probably I've read The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt more than I have any of the rest of these things, and yet it is it is in the front of the line. So, but this isn't long. I could do both. But anyway, let's the Steve pyramid for today's Brattle trip, which was entirely egged on by Aaron Facer. Because somehow he's finding time. All of his time should be taken up with pampering little Stevina, but instead he's somehow finding time to go haul books, and a lot of other people hauling books too. I was being taunted left, right, and center by Booktube, so I went to the Brattle. I got the book On the Hunt for the Bismarck, which is a small story on its own. Kennedy goes into the story of the building of the Bismarck, the commissioning, the idea behind the naval enhancement that brought about the Bismarck and its sister ships. The pursuit, the hunting and the sinking of the Bismarck gets a lot of attention here, but it's not just that. Then 2 books on Gettysburg, one by an author that a lot of you Civil War fans will know because you read his Antietam book, and one by an author named Noah, because I guess that's going to be the goal for today. So 2 Gettysburg books. Then The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt. Oh my. Then Crossfire, by the late, and at least by me, lamented Jim Mars. Sapiens, because I, too, hate women. The Word, by Irving Wallace. How amazing to find a hardcover of The Word. And then 2 different translations of Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio by Pu Song Ling. So 2 different translations. That is going to be a joy on its own to go through. Because when I don't know the original, when I can't read the original of any kind of classic like this, and even when I can read the original, I love the art of translation. I just love it. I love seeing the differences, the strengths and weaknesses of these versions that are coming to the American book market. I think that is fantastic. Fantastically interesting. So there you go. That's a Brattle book haul for you. I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.